Hi there, this is Mark Suiso at Makaha Mangoes. We're doing the COVID shutdown. We're going to do a little talk about growing mango trees today. And what we have are some large trees, talking about how we should manage these trees for the large side, and then how we should manage the smaller trees when we go in the back. It's May 2nd, and it's a little early in the mango season, and this is 2020. So if you look in the background here, and to my right, you have a mango tree, and if you see this, normally at this time of the year, you should have a lot of fruit on the tree. What has happened this year is we had a lot of intermittent rain. If you look up on the side, you see some dead branches. And the dead branches are usually a sign that it didn't have enough water and it had some dieback. So that's part of the problem with not having a lot of production. The other thing is, if you look here to the side, you see a few small trees, fruit here. They're about 2 or 3 inches, and that fruit won't be ripe until maybe July, and that's very little. You should have more than that. Again, the reason why you didn't have a lot of fruit on this tree is because it did dry out a little bit. There's not much we can do at this point other than try to give it a little bit of water, but not having enough water earlier in the season is why you're not having a lot of fruit now. Let's go to another tree and I'll explain what's going on here. Okay, so coming up on this tree, if you look on this edge of the tree, you see this is what you should normally see at this time of the year. Again, it's the beginning of May. The fruit's about 3 inches in size. You got maybe 1 or 2 fruit per panicle. And this is sort of the ideal, is what you want to have. And the reason why this tree did that is because it did flower early enough that the fruit set and things look good. However, if we switch over to the other side of this tree, you see the lighter color leaves here? These lighter colored leaves are young leaves, and young leaves do not produce flowers. So as this tree was getting water, and we had a lot of heavy rain early in the year, that heavy rain led to leaf development and not flower development. So ideally you want cold, dry winters, not wet, warm winters. So this year we did have a lot of rain, a little warmer weather than normal. And so earlier we had some nice weather, but later in the season, January, February, we ended up getting a lot of rain, and that's why we ended up with a lot of leaves. So some flowers, some set, but not enough. And then we got that heavy rain that came in. So this time of the year, you see there's a lot of fruit that tends to drop. And I know that's a concern to a lot of people, that you drop the fruit. The tree can only hold so much fruit. And if you look up in the tree, you see this has got, what, 5 fruit on 1 panicle. That's a little heavy for the tree. Actually, there was a lot more than that. And what you see on the ground is what's happening. The tree naturally drops fruit that it cannot support. And often this will happen. It's normal. You can try to get the tree to hold a little bit more, keeping the water consistent, reducing the nitrogen, keeping more potassium on the tree. But when you do this, you end up with smaller fruit. It's better to have a few big fruit than a lot of small fruit. So it's natural to let the fruit drop like this. You want to have 1 or 2. This is ideal. So here's an example of a really large tree. This tree is actually over 50 years old. And left to itself, it'll be over 50 feet high. And a tree that's that high is really wasted. The fruit ends up falling, and it's better to keep the tree below that. So here's an example where we brought the tree down. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the bigger branches are actually going lateral or going sideways. They're not going up. We're trying to curb the growth of the tree going upward and encourage the tree to go sidewards by cutting the branches that are going up and encouraging the branches that are going sideways. Now, the mistake that's made a lot of time by people is they stump the tree. And if you look up in here, you'll see some examples where we have the vertical branches that are stumped. And then all that does is it gets new growth to go on top of it. What you want to do is cut those vertical branches off and encourage only the lateral branches to go up there. So if you look closely here, you see that there's a branch that's going up that I stumped. But you see there's new growth coming back, and I've cut back the growth that was going upward and encourage the branches that are going sideways. So if you take a look closely at the very top of that branch, that big stump branch, you'll see the bigger branches that are growing now are actually going sideways. They're about 1 inch wide, and those are the dominant branches going in a sideward fashion, not upward. In a couple of years, you won't even notice that stump anymore, and you'll see these lateral branches growing. And I'll show you an example of what happens if you give it enough time, what will happen. So here's an example. If you look back, you see the trunk here. We cut back the upper branches. We encourage this branch. The growth is going this way. And you got old growth, and you're getting fruit on it. We don't have a lot of upward growth at all on this tree. It's all going sideways. So once again, we're looking at the back side of this tree. Now this is an ongoing process. You cannot, this tree is over 50 years old. It takes time to get the tree back into shape. So it's a continuing process of encouraging the lateral growth, the sidewards growth, and discouraging the upward growth. So if you can take a look at this tree, you can see some bigger branches are actually doing that, going sideways, but there are still some branches wanting to go up. So every so many years, it's a matter of coming in here, removing those upper branches or encouraging sideward branches. So again, what we're trying to do is encourage the branches to go sideways and not go upward. Now sometimes it's a matter of pulling the branch a little bit so it's not too far upward. So here we have cables, these blue cables that you see. On the lower end, I'm pulling a branch up. So if you take a look at the lower end of this branch, you can see this branch is being pulled up so that there's some headroom and you can walk underneath it. I didn't want the branch to go any lower. If it has fruit on it, it gets really heavy, so it's pulling up. Now, as you follow this cable up, you'll see that it's actually pulling a branch that I want to keep that branch going sideways. I don't want that branch to go up. Now, it's been like this for a number of years now. The branch is actually now going sideways and not going up. If I didn't have that cable on it, that branch would have been going up. So here's another example where we're using cables to lift the lower branches so that there's some room underneath, and we're pulling down on the upper branches to keep it from going upward and encouraging the upper branches to go sideways as well. And we're using cables for this. So if you take a look at these cables, we want to be careful not to choke off the branch and leave enough room for some growth of the bark and not choking it with the cable. So I leave some space there. And I need to take a look at that every couple of years or so. So here's another example of a large tree that we've been trying to, over the last few years, bring it down so it's growing sideways. So you can see some of the bigger branches are going sideways. However, if you look in the center part of the tree, you'll see some of the bigger branches are still going upward. And I'm going to have to cut these to encourage more of the sideward growth. So I'm going to cut it down, the ones that are going up, to encourage the ones to go sideways. Okay, so here we have some intermediate sized trees, and often what happens is you'll plant a variety of mango and you're finding that that variety is not as desirable and you want to introduce another variety. So there's ways to graft onto an existing tree, and here's an example of one that we've done quite a while ago. You can always tell that the graft, well, in this case I put here, and you can see there's a difference in the bark. So here we're looking really closely at this. So you can see the bark, if you look from here to here, the bark looks different. And this difference in bark is where the graft actually occurred. This upper variety has a much more desirable quality. However, I did leave some of the lower branches on because sometimes maybe it was just a bad season, or there might be some characters that I like on it. For a lot of homeowners, it's nice because now you can have 2 or 3 different varieties on one tree. So here we have another example. If you look, you can see the bark. If you look all the way around it, there's a ring. And again, that's where that graft was occurring. The upper section is a different variety. This is the original fruit. So if you look here, this is the fruit on the upper tree. This is the momike. I like momike. If you look on the lower section here, this is the fruit from the original. It's got a different shape on it. It was from a seed. There's no special quality on this variety. So that's why I did the graft. Here we are looking at that same tree again. If you see the whole tree, this upper section is where the graft is. You can see that's the dominant part. I left one branch here just for curiosity to see what it's like. The fruit here is much better, and I'll probably take this off. So here we're looking at a younger tree There's no special fruit on this at this point, but I'm trying to encourage this lateral growth early. And I've got it growing along the fence line, and I'll be grafting inside of here. These upward branches you see here, I'll be taking out, and I'll be grafting different varieties on this, all going sideways and not upward. So here again is another graft. I put it on this. You can see the graft actually occurred right here. It goes all the way around the tree. This is a different variety than the lower section. And here, let's look at one more example. So you see the branch, this trunk coming up. You can see a little difference in the color of the bark. And if you look all the way around, you see there's a difference all the way around, and that's where the graft occurred. Okay, so here's an example where you can put 3 different varieties on one tree. So here you got this right here is the Mapuleu that I grafted right there. Over here, I have a Raposa. I grafted right there. You can see the line right there. And right here, you see this graft here, I have, if you look, there's an XL, the different shape. So when planting trees, one of the thoughts that's coming up is think about a grapevine. And this is a technique that's been used a lot in Australia and elsewhere. It's called a trellis. They have a couple of different formats. And what we're doing is we're running a cable along the line, and we're forcing the tree to grow along this cable. Even with this graft here, I'm running the branch this way, and the graft is here. I have it covered so the bark doesn't get too exposed to the sun and burn. But I actually run, if you can see, I wrap the tree around this cable. It forces the tree to grow. Lateral is good, vertical is bad. Okay, so what we tried to show today is some examples of larger trees and what you can do at this time of the year to try to get more fruit. Little late, make sure it gets enough water so the fruit drop doesn't get too bad. Adding potassium to help it out. The bigger trees, you want to restrict the upward growth, cut them back if they're too far gone, and encourage the sideward growth. The younger trees, you want to try to graft other varieties if you need to. There's plenty of ways to do that. Encourage the lateral growth when they're young. It makes it easier. And then if you need to, you can always tie a cable to force it to grow sideways along the way. This is the home of some very tasty mangoes, primarily because of the sun. You can grow mangoes in your yard. All you need is a little bit of space. Young trees need about 15 feet. The big trees need to cut them back, get sidewards growth. This is Mark Suiso with Makaha Mangoes. Aloha.